Everyone in Cedar Hollow thought Mara Ellison came home to take something from them. Their jobs, their bonuses, their first real chance in years to stop counting overdue bills at the kitchen table. That was the story Caleb Voss wanted them to believe. And Caleb was very good at giving desperate people a story they could afford to trust. The factory had arrived 6 months earlier with bright banners, clean trucks, and men in polished boots who shook every hand like they had been sent by mercy itself. Every family received a support check. Every household received a promise that local workers would be hired first. For a town that had buried 3 farms, 2 stores, and most of its pride in the last decade, hope did not have to be perfect. It only had to show up wearing a hard hat. So when Mara came back from college and started asking why the air smelled metallic before sunrise, why the leaves near the old ditch had burned brown at the edges, and why dead frogs were appearing behind the church lot, people did not hear a warning. They heard judgment. They heard betrayal. They heard her father's voice again. Samuel Ellison had once stood in that same town hall and told them the land beneath Cedar Hollow carried water faster than anyone understood. He warned that one careless company could poison wells before anyone saw the river change color. Back then, they called him dramatic, bitter, afraid of progress. Now his daughter stood where he had stood, holding a glass jar in both hands. At the bottom of the jar, black water turned in a slow circle. Caleb Voss sat in the front row, his clean hands folded over a folder thick enough to buy a town's silence. On the table beside him lay the agreement every household had been told to sign by 6 tomorrow evening. A signature meant bonus checks. A signature meant priority hiring. A signature meant accepting the factory's safety report, including the pages most people had never read. Mara lifted the jar. "Please don't sign that agreement tomorrow." No one moved. Then, the town clerk whispered, "Your father tried to scare us too." A few people looked away. Caleb did not. He watched Mara with the calm face of a man who had already taught a town which truth to hate. And that was when Mara realized the factory had not only poisoned the river, it had already poisoned the way people remembered the one man who tried to save it. 3 days earlier, Mara had come home with a duffel bag, a cracked laptop, and an exhaustion so deep that even familiar roads felt strange. She had not come back to fight anyone. She had come back to sleep. The road into Cedar Hollow still curved between soybean fields and tired pasture land, but the old wooden welcome sign now carried a new metal banner beneath it. Home of Voss River Works, building tomorrow together. Mara slowed the car. Beyond the South Ridge, where the McKinley Orchard used to be, silver tanks rose above the trees. Blue company flags lined the access road. A guard waved trucks through a gate that had not existed when Mara left for college. The orchard was gone. In its place sat gravel, chain-link fence, drainage trenches, and a factory bright enough to look clean from a distance. Her mother was waiting on the porch. Ruth Ellison hugged Mara hard, then held her at arm's length. "You're thin," she said. "You always say that." Inside, the kitchen smelled of lemon cleaner and biscuits cooling on the stove. Then Mara noticed the white envelope on the table. Voss River Works was printed across the front. Ruth followed her eyes. They gave one to every household. Community support payment. How much? Enough to help with the furnace. That's not an amount. It's enough to not be ashamed of needing it. Mara let the envelope go. Outside the kitchen window, the wind carried a sharp smell through the maple branches. Not smoke, not rust. "Metal, do you smell that?" Mara asked. Ruth turned back to the stove. "The factory has a startup odor." They explained it at the meeting. Factories don't get to rename smells. Mara. Her mother said her name softly, but it already carried a warning. That evening, Ruth took her to the diner. Half the town seemed to be there, and nearly every table had a Voss River Works flyer folded beside the salt shaker. Local jobs. Clean future. Stronger Cedar Hollow. Then Mara saw the note taped under the poster. Public information meeting tonight. Community agreement signing tomorrow, 6 p.m., Town Hall. Bring ID for hiring priority. "What agreement?" she asked. Earl Maddox answered before Ruth could. "Just paperwork saying we support the project." It already opened, Mara said. Why do they need support paperwork now? That's how business works. That's how pressure works. The diner quieted in pieces. Earl's smile tightened. Some of us have been waiting 30 years for pressure that pays. On the walk home, Ruth did not speak until they reached the old feed store at the corner. The windows were boarded now. The sign with Samuel Ellison's name hung crooked above the door. You should be careful, Ruth said. I asked a question. One question from you sounds different here. Because of Dad? Ruth faced the store and said nothing. Mara knew the answer anyway. Her father had spent his last years warning Cedar Hollow about groundwater, old mine channels, and the way contamination could travel under dry land. People had stopped inviting him to meetings. They stopped buying feed from him. After he died, they brought Ruth casseroles, but no one said they were sorry. At home, Mara saw the old wooden crate behind a stack of blankets in her closet. Her father's crate. She touched the latch. Downstairs, Ruth called, "Leave that alone, please." Mara pulled her hand back. That night, she woke before dawn with her throat dry, and the smell back in the room. Rotten eggs. Burned metal. Vet pennies in a jar. No crickets sounded outside. Mara got up, took 3 clean glass jars from the kitchen, and stepped into the cold dark. Behind the church lot, the old ditch lay under a thin line of mist. Frogs used to scream there after rain. Now the water was quiet. She filled the first jar upstream. Clear enough. The second came from the bend near the old mining channel. Cloudy. The third came closer to the drainage cut that ran below the new factory fence. For half a second, the water looked normal. Then a black thread rose from the bottom. It curled slowly through the jar like ink waking up. A twig snapped behind her. Mara turned. A young man in a Voss River Works jacket stood near the fence line. One hand gripping a lunch bag, a hard hat tucked under his arm. His eyes went to the jar, then to the factory road. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Mara held the glass tighter. Neither should that. A truck engine started beyond the fence. The young man stepped back into the trees. Before he disappeared, he lifted one finger to his lips, not like a threat, like a plea. By noon, Mara had photographed dead frogs behind the church lot, leaves burned brown along the ditch, and a blue jay lying under the fence where children waited for the school bus. By evening, she had asked for 5 minutes at the town meeting. And when she walked into Cedar Hollow Town Hall with the black water turning at the bottom of a glass jar, Caleb Voss was already waiting in the front row. Town Hall did not look like a place where people came to disagree. It looked like a place where a decision had already been decorated. Blue and white Voss River Works banners hung from the rafters. Tables held job applications, benefit packets, and glossy brochures of smiling workers in spotless safety glasses. At the front, Mayor Harold Pike stood beside the microphone with both hands resting on his belt buckle. He wore his Sunday jacket, the one with shiny elbows. And his expression carried the strained pride of a man trying to believe he had finally done something good. Mara stayed near the side aisle with the jar wrapped in a dish towel. She could feel people noticing it. Not looking directly. Not openly. Just glancing at the towel. Then at her face. Then away again. Ruth sat in the third row. Her job application folded in her purse like a private prayer. Caleb Voss rose before anyone called his name. He did not move like a man asking permission. He moved like the meeting belonged to him because he had paid for the chairs. "Friends," he said, and that one word softened half the crowd before he had said anything true. He thanked the farmers, the mothers driving 40 minutes for work, and Mayor Pike for choosing progress over fear. People clapped because it sounded better than admitting how afraid they had been. Mara watched Caleb's hands. Clean nails. Gold wedding band. A pen clipped perfectly inside his folder. Nothing about him looked rushed, though the sample agreement on the front table had to become final by 6 tomorrow evening. The first round of local hiring opens immediately after the community agreement is completed, Caleb continued. Packaging, transport, security, maintenance, clerical support. Real position. Earl Maddox nodded so hard his coffee rippled. Mrs. Ward reached down and squeezed her little girl's shoulder. Meneer Pike looked at the crowd as if he could already see paychecks arriving in mailboxes. Then Caleb's voice lowered, careful and warm. I know there have been concerns. That is normal. Change always brings noise. Sometimes it brings old noise back with it. Mara felt the sentence turn toward her before he did. Caleb did not say her father's name at first. He did something smarter. He let the town remember Samuel Ellison on its own. A cough moved through the back row. Years ago, Caleb said, this community was nearly denied opportunity because fear was allowed to dress itself as expertise. Ruth closed her eyes. Mara's grip tightened around the towel. Caleb opened his folder and lifted a packet with a pale green seal on the cover. That is why we came prepared. Independent Safety Review, Water Impact Summary, Air Quality Documentation, Soil Assessment. Every household will receive access to the full report. Not a copy, Mara noticed. Access. He placed the packet on the table but did not pass it around. Mayor Pike stepped forward. I've reviewed the summary myself. Mara looked at him. The mayor looked at the microphone. It shows the facility is operating within accepted limits, he said. Accepted by whom? Mara wanted to ask. But Caleb had already turned to the hiring packets. Signing the agreement does not silence anyone, he said. It simply confirms that Cedar Hollow stands together while the expansion review moves forward. The lie worked because it sounded responsible, practical, and close enough to money arriving before winter. At the back table, a company assistant began laying out pens in straight rows. Each pen had the Voss River Works logo printed along the side. Mara saw people watching those pens like they were keys. A man whispered that his daughter needed dental surgery. Another asked whether signing early improved hiring chances. Caleb smiled. We will always remember who believed in Cedar Hollow first. The room leaned toward him, toward the pens, toward a tomorrow that did not ask them to smell the air before sunrise. Then Mayor Pike cleared his throat. We do have one resident who asked to speak before we adjourn, he said. Resident. Not Mara. Not Samuel's daughter. Not environmental chemistry student. Just resident. Caleb turned at last. His eyes found the towel in Mara's hands. This time, his smile reached only halfway. Of course, he said. Transparency matters. The crowd parted just enough for Mara to walk through, but not enough to welcome her. She reached the microphone and unwrapped the jar. Black water turned once under the town hall lights. In the front row, Caleb clicked his pen open, as if he were ready to correct her before she began. Mara placed the jar on the podium where everyone could see it. For a moment, nobody spoke. The water looked heavier than river water should look, with a dark stain near the bottom and a faint yellow film clinging to the glass. Mara set 3 photographs beside it. A dead frog behind the church lot. A row of leaves browned along the old ditch. A blue jay lying under the school bus fence with its wings folded too neatly against the dirt. These were taken this morning, she said. All within a quarter-mile of the drainage cut below the factory ridge. Earl Maddox leaned back in his chair. Animals die, Mara. Not in clusters like this. It's been hot. It was 48 degrees before sunrise. Someone near the back muttered, "Here we go." Mara lowered her eyes to her notes only to steady her hands. "I'm not asking anyone to hate the factory," she said. "I'm asking you not to sign a document before you understand what is happening around the ditch, the river, and the old mine channel." Caleb lifted one hand politely. Mayor Pike gave him the microphone without asking Mara if she was finished. That small act told the room who still owned the meeting. Caleb stood beside her, close enough that the clean scent of his cologne cut through the dusty air. "Miss Ellison is clearly passionate," he said. Mara heard the insult beneath it. Emotional, unreliable. "Cedar Hollow deserves facts," Caleb continued. "Not fear built from photographs without context." He opened the green-sealed packet and removed a single page. Not the whole report. Just one page. Our environmental review found no actionable contamination linked to Voss River Works operations. The facility remains within accepted regulatory thresholds. He turned the page toward the crowd. People saw the seal. They saw the signature line. They saw the word independent. They did not see what was missing. Mara did. Who collected the samples? She asked. Caleb looked at her. A certified partner lab. Which locations? The report summarizes multiple locations. That isn't an answer. It is the answer provided by professionals. A few people nodded. Not because they understood, but because the sentence sounded expensive. Mara reached for her backpack and pulled out a smaller jar wrapped in a paper towel. Caleb's eyes moved to it. Just once. This was collected upstream, Mara said, setting it beside the first jar. This was collected at the bend near the old mine channel. And this was collected below the drainage cut. She pointed to each one. 3 points. Same morning, same gloves, same jars. Only one shows this reaction. Earl crossed his arms. A reaction to what? I don't know yet. That's why I'm asking for time. Caleb gave a soft laugh. You don't know yet, he repeated, and the crowd shifted as honesty became weakness. Mrs. Ward pulled her daughter closer. So you don't actually know it's the factory. I know the pattern points there. But you don't know. Mara looked at the little girl's face, then at the Voss hiring packet in Mrs. Ward's lap. No, Mara said. Not enough to accuse in court. Enough to ask you not to sign away your right to ask questions. That should have mattered. Instead, the word court frightened them more than the jar did. A farmer stood. My son has an interview if we sign tomorrow. My husband's been out of work 8 months, another woman said. You think we don't smell things? Earl snapped. We live here. We know this land better than any school taught you. Mara turned toward him. Then you know the ditch behind the church shouldn't be dead. His face hardened. You sound just like Samuel. Ruth rose halfway from her chair, then sat back down as if the movement hurt. The name changed the air more than the evidence had. Caleb did not interrupt this time. He allowed the town to do the damage for him. Mara lifted the photographs again. My father warned about the old mine channel because water moves under this town faster than it looks on the surface. If contaminants enter that channel, they won't stay by the ridge. They can reach wells. They can reach pasture land. Mayor Pike shifted behind Caleb. Mara, he said, using her name now because he wanted to sound kind while stopping her, we cannot delay an economic agreement for speculation. It's not speculation if the signing protects the company before the town has independent testing. Caleb's expression changed by a fraction recognition, not fear. She had touched the part he wanted buried. He closed the folder. The agreement does not prevent safety review, he said. It prevents outside agitators from derailing a project this community chose. Outside agitators. Mara had been born 2 streets from this building. Still, no one corrected him. Then a man in a Voss River Works polo moved near the podium with a tray of paper cups. His elbow caught the edge of the table. The first jar tipped. Mara lunged, but water spilled across the wood and onto the floor before she could save it. A dark streak ran between the boards, thin and ugly. The man stepped back. I'm sorry. I didn't see it. Mara looked at his face. He did not look sorry. Caleb sighed as if she had created the inconvenience herself. Perhaps, he said, we should adjourn before this becomes more theatrical. Mara took one slow breath. Then she lifted the smaller jar she had kept wrapped in the paper towel. The sample below the drainage cut. Still sealed. Still dark at the bottom. Caleb's pen stopped moving for 1 second, and Mara was not the only one who saw it. At the side door, the young worker from the fence stood half hidden behind a stack of folding chairs. His eyes were not on Mara anymore. They were on the man who had spilled the jar. In that moment, Mara understood one person in the room might be more afraid of the factory than angry at her. Mara did not go home after the meeting. She let Ruth leave first. Her mother paused on the town hall steps, trapped by too many watching eyes, and only managed, drive safe. Mara nodded because anything more would have cracked in public. Mara waited until Caleb's black SUV rolled toward the factory road, then sat in her car with the sealed sample in the cup holder. The sealed sample rested in the cup holder. At 3:41 a.m., Mara parked behind the church. She had spent the hours before that reading drainage records, a 1,989 mining survey, and a faded satellite image. On paper, the channel did not connect to the factory, but her father had once taught her that water did not care what maps wanted to admit. The air was cold enough to sting. No frogs called. No insects sang. Only the factory pulsed beyond the ridge. At 3:58, the ditch looked ordinary: shallow water, muddy banks, mist lying low above the surface. Then the ground vibrated. A thin yellow-white foam slipped from the old concrete culvert. The smell followed. Rotten eggs and wet metal, strong enough to coat her tongue. Mara filmed first. The culvert, the timestamp, the foam, and the water changing where the discharge met the ditch. At 4:12, a black sheen surfaced in a narrow ribbon, sliding out like something trying to stay hidden. She filled 3 jars culvert mouth, 10 feet downstream, river bend, and labeled each slowly because fear made her handwriting ugly. A branch snapped behind her. This time, she did not turn fast. She capped the marker, put it in her pocket, and said, "If you're going to spill these too, you'll have to come closer." Silence. Then the young man from the fence stepped into the edge of her flashlight. He was still in his Voss jacket, hair flattened on one side, as if he had slept badly or not at all. "My name's Ethan," he said. Mara checked his empty hands before she studied his face. "Do you work the night shift?" "Not tonight." "Then why are you here?" He glanced toward the ridge. "Because after the meeting, Dennis bragged about saving Mr. Voss from your little science show." "The man who knocked over the jar?" Ethan nodded once. "Did Caleb tell him to do it?" Mara asked. "I didn't hear that." "That's not the same as no." Ethan looked away. The factory pulse deepened again. Somewhere beyond the trees, a truck shifted gears. "They tell us the back pumps run for pressure balancing," he said. "Only during startup." "And what do you think?" "I think a maintenance guy told me not to log a valve alarm because it was old channel noise. I think 2 cameras behind tank 3 go out every morning between 4 and 4:30. And if I say that out loud, my sister loses her clinic coverage." Mara's anger thinned into something more complicated. "How old is she?" 17. The answer sat between them in the cold. Ethan looked at the yellow foam gathering against a leaf. "I wanted the job to be clean," he said. "So did they." He looked at her. "The town," Mara said. "They wanted the hope to be clean." A sound came from the factory road. Tires on gravel. Ethan grabbed her flashlight and clicked it off. Darkness dropped around them. A truck rolled past above the ditch, moving slow with its headlights dimmed. On its side, Mara could just make out the Voss River Works logo, and a unit number painted near the rear wheel. Ethan lifted his phone. For 3 seconds, he recorded. Then the truck disappeared toward the service gate. Mara whispered, "Send me that." Ethan shook his head. "Not yet." "Ethan, if they know I helped you, I'm done." Before Mara could answer, a drop of rain struck the back of her hand. Then another. The storm was early. The storm followed Mara home in uneven bursts. By the time she reached the kitchen, her shoes were soaked, and the 3 new samples sat wrapped in towels inside a garage cooler. Ruth was awake. She sat at the table in her robe, not drinking the coffee in front of her. The Voss envelope was still there. So was the job application, creased where her fingers had worried the paper thin. "You went out again," Ruth said. Mara set the cooler down gently. "I had to." "No," Ruth said. "You chose to." The difference was small, but Ruth put years inside it. Mara peeled off her gloves. "There's discharge coming from the old channel before dawn. I saw it. I filmed it. I collected samples from 3 points." "And what happens when you say that in front of everyone?" Ruth asked. "What happens when they decide you're Samuel all over again?" Mara turned toward the hallway that led to her old room. Maybe Dad was right. Ruth flinched as if Mara had slammed a door. "He paid for being right," Ruth said. "You know the story." "I know the sound of him pretending not to hear them laugh." Her phone buzzed with a PDF warning from Voss River Works. Cease all defamatory statements pending legal review. The letter accused her of spreading unverified claims, disrupting an economic process, and creating reputational harm that could affect hiring. Ruth saw the logo before Mara could lower the screen. What is that? A warning letter. Her mother stood so fast the chair legs scraped the floor. From them? Yes. Ruth lowered one hand from her mouth. You think this is proof you're winning? I think it means they're scared. I think it means they can afford lawyers. Before Mara could respond, Ruth's phone rang. She looked at the screen and went still. Voss River Works Human Resources. Mara watched the hope leave her mother's face before the call even began. Ruth answered with a voice too polite for a woman standing barefoot in her own kitchen before sunrise. Yes, this is Ruth Ellison. A pause. Yes, I understand. Another pause. No, of course. I appreciate you letting me know. She hung up without saying goodbye. Mara's stomach tightened. Mom, they're postponing my interview. Because of me. Ruth folded the job application once, then again. The paper made a sharp sound in the quiet kitchen. They said there has been a high volume of candidates. That's not why. I know. Ruth did not shout. That hurt more. At the stove, Ruth said. When your father carried maps into meetings, I thought truth would protect him. Instead, they punished him for making them afraid. Mara whispered, I'm not trying to become him. Ruth turned back, tired. That is what scares me. You do not have to try. The word stayed with Mara long after Ruth went upstairs. At 8 that morning, Cedar Hollow was already awake and restless. A flyer appeared on the bulletin board outside the diner. Do not let fear steal our future. Sign at 6. No name at the bottom. No company logo either. It did not need one. At the gas station, two men stopped talking when Mara walked in. At the pharmacy, Mrs. Ward looked at her with apology and accusation. Even the town clerk avoided her eyes when handing over the evening rules. 5 minutes maximum. No unsupported allegations. No disruption of signing process. Mara read the third line twice. Signing process. Not discussion. Not review. Process. She left without arguing. On the sidewalk, Mayor Pike stood under the awning, watching runoff stream into the gutter. I'm asking you to be careful tonight, he said. Careful with the truth or careful with their schedule. His jaw shifted. With people who are one missed paycheck away from breaking. Mara softened despite herself. That's why this matters. The mayor looked toward the factory ridge. The tanks were hidden behind the storm, but their lights glowed faintly through the gray. Your father said that too, he murmured. Then maybe this time you should finish listening. Mayor Pike did not answer. Mara walked back to her car and found a folded slip of paper tucked beneath the wiper. No signature. Just 4 words written in hurried block letters. Tank 3. Camera blind. Water blurred the ink before she could read it a second time. But she did not need to. The town was still leaning toward Caleb Voss. Her mother was paying the price. And somewhere inside the factory, someone had finally decided fear was not enough reason to stay silent. Mara kept the note under her palm all the way home, as if the storm might erase what was left of it. Tank 3, camera blind. 4 words were not proof, but they were a direction. Ruth was in the living room beneath the lamp. Samuel's old sweater folded across her lap while a weather alert crawled silently along the television screen. Mara stopped in the doorway. Ruth looked at the wet paper in her hand. What now? I need Dad's crate. No. Mom. I said no. Mara stepped farther into the room. They're using the old channel. Someone inside the factory knows it. If that discharge reaches the wells, you don't know it will. I know enough to check. Ruth's fingers tightened around the sweater. That crate did not save him. The sentence cut through the house. For years, Mara had thought her mother kept the crate closed because the memories hurt. Now she understood the anger too. At the paper, the maps, and the warnings that had taken Samuel away long before the accident did. Mara sat across from her. I'm not asking it to save him, she said. I'm asking it to help us save everyone else. Ruth looked toward the dark hallway. Rain struck the windows harder. At last, she rose. Together, they set the crate on the kitchen table between the Voss envelope and the folded job application. For a moment, neither woman touched the latch. Then Ruth opened it. Dust, old paper, and cedar shavings rose from the open crate. Inside were field notebooks, county maps, creek bed photographs, clippings, and envelopes marked in Samuel's square handwriting. The dates ran back more than 15 years. Her father had not been guessing. He had been documenting. One notebook showed Cedar Hollow's limestone bed, old mine tunnels in red pencil, and well measurements Mara had never known mattered. Water does not travel where men draw lines. It travels where rock lets it. A map unfolded from between the covers. Ruth inhaled sharply. I remember that one. It showed the South Ridge before the factory, when it was still the McKinley Orchard, and a broken line from the old mine channel to the church ditch and east side wells. Mara traced the line with one finger. The factory's new drainage cut sat almost exactly over it. Not beside it. Over it. He knew where the water would go, she said. Ruth looked at the map, as if it had aged her in seconds. He tried to show them. Mara pulled another folder from the crate. This one held a letter addressed to Mayor Harold Pike, dated 8 years earlier, with a stamped copy from the town office. Received. Samuel had warned that any industrial facility on the South Ridge would need sealed containment and independent drainage review. One paragraph was underlined twice. If chemical runoff enters the North Culvert during heavy rain, subsurface flow may carry contaminants toward residential wells within 24 to 36 hours. Mara read the line again. 24 to 36 hours. The rain on the roof no longer sounded like weather. It sounded like a clock. He wasn't against the factory, Mara said slowly. Ruth shook her head. No. He asked them to move the drainage and line the ditch. Why didn't anyone say that? Ruth gave a small, bitter laugh. Because Samuel wanted a safer project was not as useful as Samuel hated progress. Mara looked down at the stamped letter. Mayor Pike received this. Yes. Dit Caleb? Back then? No, but the development files were public. Any company doing real review would have found them. Another sealed envelope lay beneath the maps, marked only with Mara's name. Her hand stopped over it. Ruth's face changed. You knew about this. I knew he wrote it. I never read it. Why didn't you give it to me? Because you were 17 when he died, Ruth said. Because you had already lost enough. Mara opened the envelope carefully. Inside was one sheet of paper and a small photograph of 12-year-old Mara beside Samuel at the river with a plastic sampling cup. The letter was short. Mada, if you ever read this because the water changed, do not let them make you think noticing danger is the same as hating home. People will forgive a lie that feeds them before they forgive a truth that frightens them. Be patient if you can. Be stubborn if you must. Use the map. Dad. Mara sat down before her knees could fail her. Ruth covered her mouth. For a while, only the old refrigerator answered. Then Mara placed the letter beside the samples from the ditch. The pieces no longer felt scattered. Tank 3. Camera blind. The old channel. The drainage cut. The agreement at 6. The storm. Mara photographed every map, stamped letter, and underlined warning. She sealed the originals in a plastic folder and put that folder inside her backpack. Ruth watched her. What are you going to do? Mara looked at the Voss envelope, then at the job application Ruth had folded and refolded until the paper was soft. I'm going to make Mayor Pike read what he signed for. And if he won't? Mara picked up the sealed jar from below the drainage cut. The dark layer had settled at the bottom, waiting. Then I'll read it in front of everyone. Ruth was quiet for several seconds. Then she reached into the crate, took out Samuel's old field notebook, and handed it to her daughter. This time, she did not ask Mara to leave it alone. Ethan Cole had told himself he would not go back inside. But at noon his sister's clinic approved 30 more days of medication through the company plan. That was how fear kept a man obedient, not with chains, but with prescriptions. At 2:48 a.m., Ethan entered through the side gate with a badge he was not supposed to use outside his shift. Beyond the main building, Tank 3 sat under floodlights, too clean-looking for what he suspected. Inside, the factory smelled of disinfectant, hot metal, and something sour beneath both. Caleb's employee slogan hung on the wall, "We build trust by doing things right." At 3:06, the maintenance office was empty, but the camera monitor showed 2 black squares. Tank 3 rear and old channel gate. Then he found the logbook. The same 4:30 outage had been marked as system maintenance every day for a week. He slid into the supply closet and pulled the door almost closed. Dennis entered with Carla from compliance. Tank 3 alarm tripped again, Carla said. It's a sensor issue. It has tripped 4 nights in a row. Then it's a 4-night sensor issue. Carla did not laugh. If that overflow hits during rain, the county will ask why the temporary basin was still full. Dennis lowered his voice. Mr. Voss said clear it before the rain gets anyone curious. Ethan held his breath. Carla said, "Through the old channel?" "That is not what the log will say. The log already says balancing transfer." "Then the log is smarter than both of us." A chair scraped. Ethan pressed his phone against the closet door and recorded. He could not see their faces clearly, but the audio caught everything. Carla whispered, "This was supposed to be temporary." Dennis answered, "So was unemployment, and the town learned to live with that." At 3:17, a low horn sounded from the rear yard. Dennis cursed. "Truck's early." The 2 supervisors left. Ethan followed from a distance. Near Tank 3, a tanker truck idled with its headlights off. The unit number matched the truck he had seen by the ditch. He filmed the plate, the hose, and Dennis opening the maintenance gate. A worker connected the hose to a side valve at the base of Tank 3. Ethan did not know the chemistry, but he knew enough about lies to recognize one. The official pipe led toward the treatment building. This hose ran toward the old channel gate. His phone buzzed in his hand. For one terrifying second, he thought someone had seen him, but it was a text from his sister. "You working late again? Don't forget signing thing tomorrow. Maybe this job finally helps us." Ethan stared at the message until the words blurred. A flashlight swept across the pavement. He ducked behind a stack of empty drums. Dennis's voice cut through the rain. "Who's there?" Ethan crouched lower, his back against cold metal. The flashlight passed over the drums twice. A security radio crackled near the loading bay. "Probably a raccoon," the guard called. Dennis swore and turned away. Ethan did not move until the hose began to pulse, soft at first, then heavier, like the factory was breathing through its teeth. He recorded 10 more seconds. Valve, hose, and a faint dark trail moving toward the weeds beyond the gate. He reached his truck with burning lungs, locked the doors, and opened Mara's contact. He attached the camera screens, maintenance logs, tanker unit number, and valve video. His thumb hovered over send. If he pressed it, he would lose his job. If he did not, Cedar Hollow might sign away the truth by evening. Ethan looked toward the factory lights. Then he sent the files with one message. "Meet me behind the old feed store before noon. Bring your father's map." Behind the old feed store, Ethan looked like a man who had run all night and still had nowhere safe to stop. Mara carried her father's map in a plastic sleeve. Ethan carried a phone he did not want to own anymore. "I sent everything," he said. "If I disappear from the employee list by lunch, you'll know why." Mara opened the files. The Tank 3 hose, the dark camera squares, and Dennis saying clear it before the rain gets anyone curious. "This can stop the signing," she said. "It can also bury me if Voss says I faked it." "He will." Ethan looked toward the boarded windows of the feed store. "Then don't let him say it first." By 11:30, Mara reached Mayor Harold Pike's office with Samuel's field notebook under her arm. Mara placed the stamped copy of Samuel. "Tell him Samuel Ellison is here again." He looked older than he had at the meeting. His tie was loose, and rain had darkened one shoulder of his jacket. "Mara," he said, "this is not a good time. It's the only time you left us." He lit her in. His office smelled of coffee, wet wool, and old paper. A harvest parade photo hung behind his desk, with Samuel in the background carrying feed to someone's truck. Mara laid out the evidence without drama. Her father's map, the letter stamped received by the town office, the underlined warning about contaminants reaching wells within 24 to 36 hours, Ethan's screenshots of the black camera feeds, the repeated maintenance log, the video of the tanker hose running from Tank 3 toward the old channel gate. You received this, Mara said. This one warned you about the exact place they're using now. I was trying to keep the town alive. So was he. Pike rubbed one hand over his face. The mill had closed. The orchard had failed. People were asking if they should move before the bank took their homes. I thought your father was asking hungry people to wait for a perfect future. You thought he was in the way. I thought he was asking hungry people to wait for a perfect future. He was asking you not to poison the one they had. The words landed. Pike picked up Samuel's letter and moved his thumb over the received stamp. Pike read until the underlined paragraph drained the color from his face. When he reached the underlined paragraph, his face lost color. Ethan shifted near the door. He had insisted on coming but refused to sit down. That video, Pike said. Can you verify where it was taken? Yes, Ethan said. And you work there? For now. Pike looked at him. Do you understand what you're risking? Ethan's jaw tightened. Do you? The mayor looked away first. Pike unlocked the bottom filing drawer and removed a thin folder with Samuel's name on the tab. He placed it on the desk with care that came too late to be respect, but not too late to matter. I kept it after the accident, he said. Inside were copies of Samuel's maps, notes from old meetings, and a recommendation for independent drainage review that had never been brought to a vote. The signing starts in 6 hours, Mara said. Cancel it. If I cancel on this alone, Caleb will say I panicked. The town will believe him. His phone buzzed before Mara could answer. Pike looked at the screen. Caleb Foss. He let it ring once, twice, then answered on speaker. Harold, Caleb said, smooth enough to sound friendly. I hear Miss Ellison is in your office. If tonight turns into a spectacle, the first hiring round pauses. Support checks pause. The clinic partnership pauses. I need you to understand what fear will cost this town. Pike's face tightened. The threat landed exactly where Caleb aimed it. On every hungry house, unpaid bill, and parent praying for insurance. Pike ended the call without replying. Now you see why I can't just cancel it, he said. Then stand with me when I show them. His eyes lifted, trapped between reputation, Caleb's money, and the people who trusted him. Pike closed Samuel's folder. I won't stop you from speaking, he said. That's not enough. I know, but he did not promise more. Mara gathered the map, the letter copies, and Ethan's printed screenshots. At the door, Pike called her name. When she turned, he was holding Samuel's original folder. Take it, he said. If Caleb calls your father a liar tonight, don't answer with memory. He placed the folder in her hands. Answer with the file I should have opened 8 years ago. By 5:30, Town Hall was full enough that people stood along the walls. The roof shuddered under each burst of weather, and Mara thought of her father's underlined warning. 24 to 36 hours. At the front, the signing table looked festive. Blue cloth, white flowers, clipped agreements, and Voss pens waiting for hands that needed money more than certainty. Caleb Voss stood near the microphone with Mayor Pike beside him. The mayor did not look at Mara when she entered. That hurt. Then, his eyes dropped to the folder in her hands. Samuel's folder. And he gave one small nod. Not courage yet. Permission. Mara walked to the side aisle. Ruth came in behind her and sat near the back, not hiding this time. Ethan slipped through the rear door in a plain jacket, his factory badge tucked inside his pocket. Caleb began before anyone could settle. Tonight is about unity, he said. It is about refusing to let fear steal a future Cedar Hollow has earned. The crowd answered with tired applause. He lifted one of the agreements. You are not signing away your voice. You are confirming your confidence in a project reviewed by qualified professionals, supported by your town leadership, and built to bring stable work back to this community. Mara watched him place the paper down. He was smooth because he had practiced being believed. Then he looked toward her. Unfortunately, a small number of unverified claims have created confusion. Claims tied to old family grievances. Claims built on emotion, not evidence. Caleb did not say Samuel's name until the room had already remembered it. "We respect the Ellison family's history," he said, "but history cannot be allowed to hold Cedar Hollow hostage." Earl Maddox clapped once. A few others joined. Mara stepped forward. "Then let's talk about history," she said. Mayor Pike reached for the microphone, but Caleb got there first. "Miss Ellison, the public comment period is limited. So is the time before people sign this." A murmur moved through the chairs. Mara opened Samuel's folder and took out the stamped letter. "This was delivered to the town office 8 years ago. My father warned that any industrial drainage on the South Ridge needed independent review because the old mine channel runs under the factory site." Caleb smiled faintly. "Your father was not an engineer for Voss River Works." "No," Mara said. "He was a man who understood the ground beneath his home." She held up the map. "The factory's drainage cut sits over the channel he marked. The same channel where I collected discolored water at 4:12 yesterday morning. The same channel connected to the ditch behind the church." Caleb gave a practiced sigh. "Again, samples taken by a private citizen without chain of custody are not proof." "You're right." That answer made him pause. Mara turned to the signing table. "So let's use your proof." Mara picked up one of the agreements and flipped to the appendix. Most people had never seen that far into it. "Page 14, she said. "Section C. By signing, residents acknowledge receipt of the company's safety summary and agree that no known contamination claim exists regarding the first 6 months of preliminary operation." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Only slightly," Mara continued. "Page 15. Residents agree to root future concerns through the community liaison process before pursuing outside review." Mrs. Ward frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means if you sign tonight, Voss can say you accepted their safety report before independent testing was done. It means your first complaint has to go through the company that may have caused the problem." "That is a deliberate misreading," Caleb said. "Then read it aloud." He did not move. The room finally began looking at the paper instead of the pens. Mara set the agreement down and placed 3 printed screenshots beside it. Tank 3 rear camera. Old channel gate camera. Both blacked out between 4 and 4:30. Repeated in the maintenance log for the past week. Caleb turned toward Mayor Pike. "These materials are stolen internal documents." Ethan stepped from the rear wall. "No," he said, "they are records of what I saw while employed there." Every head turned. Ethan's face was pale, but he did not step back. Caleb's voice cooled. "Mr. Cole, I would be careful." "I was careful," Ethan said. "That's why I recorded it." He raised his phone. Pike had unlocked the old AV cabinet before the doors opened. Mara had connected Ethan's phone with shaking hands. Rain in the background. Tank 3 under floodlights. A tanker hose running away from the official treatment line. Dennis Klein's voice, rough and clear. "Mr. Voss said clear it before the rain gets anyone curious." The room changed person by person. Caleb moved toward Ethan. "That audio has no context." "It has a hose," Mara said. "It has a unit number, a log entry calling a camera outage maintenance, and your supervisor saying your name." Caleb turned back to the crowd because he still believed the crowd was easier to hold than the facts. "This is exactly what outside agitation does," he said. "It turns neighbors against employers. It turns progress into suspicion. Ask yourselves who benefits if this project fails." He pointed at Ethan without looking at him. "A young employee breaks policy, trespasses through restricted areas, records private operations, and suddenly we are expected to risk hundreds of jobs on stolen footage?" Ethan went white. Caleb kept going, sharper now. "And Miss Ellison brings her father's old grievance back to town on the one night Cedar Hollow is finally ready to move forward. If this signing stops, hiring stops. The support checks stop. The clinic partnership goes back under legal review. That is not a threat. That is what happens when a town chooses suspicion over stability. The room flinched. For a few seconds, the pens looked powerful again. Mara expected that. She also knew evidence could stop a signature, but emotion had to change a town. Ruth stood. Not fast, not dramatically. She simply rose with Samuel's field notebook in her hands. My husband did not hate this town, she said. Her voice was not loud, but people knew it well enough to listen. He fixed your pumps. He opened the feed store on credit when your calves were sick. He drove medicine to farms in storms. And when he warned you about the water, you let them call him bitter because it was easier than being afraid. Earl looked down. Ruth walked to the front and placed the notebook beside the agreement. I let that happen too, she said, because I was tired, because I wanted peace. Because I wanted my daughter to have a life somewhere. People did not punish her for noticing things. Mara felt the words hit her chest. Then Mrs. Ward stood with her little girl clinging to her sleeve. My daughter coughed until there was blood on the tissue this morning, she said. The sentence cut through every polished phrase Caleb had brought. Mrs. Ward swallowed. She played by the church ditch 2 days ago. I told myself it was a cold because I needed that job packet to be true. No one clapped. No one needed to. Mayor Pike stepped to the microphone. Caleb turned sharply. Harold. Then Caleb lowered his voice just enough for the front rows to hear. If you do this, the hiring round dies tonight. You will be the mayor who cost Cedar Hollow its last chance. The mayor looked at the papers, then at Ruth, then at the dark jar on the table. For the first time all evening, he did not look away. I received Samuel Ellison's warning 8 years ago, Pike said. I failed to bring it to a vote. Tonight, I will not ask this town to sign another paper I have not fully read. He gathered the agreements from the signing table. One stack, then another. The Voss pens rolled across the cloth and fell to the floor. Caleb reached for the papers. You do not have the authority to suspend a private agreement. Pike held them against his chest. Maybe not, he said. But I have the authority to refuse this room. This town seal, and my name to it. He turned to the crowd. No one signs tonight. Caleb's anger slipped, and something bare showed beneath it. Mara picked up the glass jar and held it where the town could see the dark layer settled at the bottom. I did not come home to take your future, she said. I came home because someone already had. Outside, thunder rolled over Cedar Hollow. Inside, nobody reached for a pen. The storm chased the crowd down the steps. No one threw away the Voss flyers where Caleb could see, but no one signed. It followed the crowd out of town hall and down the steps, soaking jackets, hiring packets, and the blue Voss flyers people had folded into their pockets only an hour earlier. No one threw them away in front of Caleb. Shame did not make people brave that quickly. But no one signed. That was enough for one night. Caleb left through the side door with 2 company attorneys. Dennis tried to follow, but 2 county officers stopped him near the curb. Mayor Pike had already requested an emergency inspection. The company statement called the situation a misunderstanding and promised transparency, partnership, and prosperity. It did not mention the old channel, the camera outage, or the hose. Mara slept briefly on the living room couch and woke to Ruth making coffee in Samuel's old sweater. I hated that notebook, Ruth said. I hated how people looked at him after he carried it into meetings. But last night, putting it on that table felt like handing him back his name. Cedar Hollow moved carefully through the morning after. People did not line up to apologize. That would have been too clean. Earl Maddox left a paper bag of biscuits on Ruth's porch and walked away before anyone opened the door. Mrs. Ward called from the clinic to say Ivy was stable, frightened, and asking whether the birds would come back. Mayor Pike announced that the signing was suspended until an independent environmental review could be completed and released in full. The termination email cited unauthorized access and confidentiality violations. Ethan read it behind the old feed store and laughed without humor. I guess doing things right wasn't in the employee handbook. I called the county attorney, Pike said. They are opening a whistleblower retaliation file, and the clinic agreed to keep your sister's prescription active while the review is pending. Ethan stared at him. Why? Pike looked toward the factory ridge. Because doing the right thing should not leave a family without medicine. My dad's still going to say I threw away the only good job we had. Maybe, Mara said. But one day your sister may know you helped keep her water safe. Ethan folded the receipt and put it in his jacket. That better count for something. It does, Mara said. Just not always fast enough. That afternoon, the storm weakened to mist. Mara walked to the river with the first jar from town hall. The black layer had settled thicker at the bottom, dark and patient, while yellow inspection tape reflected upstream. Behind her, footsteps pressed into the wet grass. Ruth came first. Then Mayor Pike. Then Mrs. Ward, holding Ivy's hand. The little girl carried a clean glass jar with both hands. The water inside came from the hand pump behind the clinic. The one county workers had tested that morning. Ivy held it out to Mara. Mom said you can tell if it's safe. Mara studied the jar. The water caught the pale afternoon light. No black thread rose from the bottom. No oily ring clung to the glass. But Mara did not smile too quickly. She crouched so she was level with Ivy. I can tell you what I see, she said, and I can help test what we can't see. Ivy looked at the river, then back at her. Is this one safe? Mara thought of Caleb's clean words, Samuel's maps, Ruth's folded application, Ethan's shaking phone, and a town that had almost traded its right to ask questions for a pen with a logo on it. She placed the old dark jar on the ground beside the new clear one. Not to compare shame with hope. To remember both. Not yet, Mara said softly, but now we're watching.